Today I'll be talking about how to make a YouTube video. I'll be giving you a breakdown on the equipment I personally use, and I'll also go into detail about pre-production, production, and the post-production process. Now, before I get into the details, I'd like to point out that even though I do have an associate's degree in digital video, there's still a lot that I do not know, and I definitely won't claim to be an expert. But hopefully some of the things I'll talk about in this video will give you some helpful tips and tricks to use in your own YouTube journey. A lot of what I'm about to preach about isn't always something that I've practiced myself, but part of the reason why I'm making this video is to hold myself accountable so that I make sure that I'm creating higher quality content in the future. I'll give you a rundown of 9 items you'll want to gather before making a video. Those include a camera, SD card reader, computer, editing software, lights, a green screen, a microphone, and a tripod. The first thing I'll discuss is a camera. Now, you can use several different types of cameras, including DSLR cameras, mirrorless cameras, or even iPhones, but today I'll talk about what I use specifically. I keep it pretty simple and just use this Nikon. Of course, you don't have to use this specific camera, and there are many options on Amazon for camera bundles that are less than $500. Many of these bundles will include the next items that I'm about to discuss. Second item you'll want is an SD card. That is the memory card that you will use with your DSLR camera. If you're using a drone or a GoPro, you may be using a micro SD card. You can find a 128 gigabyte SD card on Amazon for around $30 to $40. The third item I'll talk about is an SD card reader. These are also easy to find on Amazon and at a reasonable price. I personally use this Kingston SD card reader and I've never had any issues with it. Obviously, if you decide to use your phone as the camera, you won't need the SD card or the SD card reader. The fourth thing on my list is a computer. I personally use a Mac computer and have loved it, but they can get pretty pricey. Many people use PCs and different kinds of laptops or tablets, and these decisions might affect which software will work best, which is what I'll discuss next. Also, if you're using your phone as your computer, great, just make sure that you have plenty of space on your phone for the footage. Editing software has come a long way, and it's definitely made the post-production process much more efficient. I personally use Final Cut Pro, which works great on Mac computers and rarely crashes, at least in my experience. The current cost is about $300, but it is a one-time payment. The other editing software I highly recommend is Adobe Premiere Pro, which is another great program, and it costs around $20 a month for the individual program, but could be cheaper if you're a student or have some other Adobe package that includes other programs. I've heard a lot of good things about Adobe Premiere Pro, but it does seem to crash a little more often than Final Cut. Each program has its pros and cons, but Final Cut definitely would be more compatible on a Mac compared to other computers. If you're using your phone, I personally would use VideoShop, but there are many other programs out there. In fact, whether you are editing on your phone, a tablet, a Mac, PC, or anything else, there are programs out there that are cheaper than Final Cut Pro or Adobe Premiere Pro. Just make sure to do a lot of research and find out which one works best for you. Lighting. You can find many different lights online and in stores, and you can pretty much get as professional as you want with it. With that being said, you definitely don't have to be rich to have decent lighting. There are many options available on Amazon, but really you might not even have to buy anything. Natural light is the best light in my opinion, so if you got a lot of natural light in the room, that might be the best option. If not, you could even use one of these flexible reading lamps if you're on a low budget. That's actually what I'm using right now, though I do plan on buying an LED lighting setup for my videos in the next month or so. The next item I'll discuss is a green screen. Now, this may or may not be used very often depending on what type of content you'll be creating, but this would definitely be useful if you're doing reviews and other videos similar to that format. Personally, I just went to Walmart and had them cut out a big section of green material, like in the sewing section, and it works perfectly fine, though there are obviously other options. You'll also want to find a decent microphone. I am still personally in the process of getting a better one, but for now I use this Rode mic that mounts on top of my camera. The last item I will mention is a tripod. It isn't always necessary to use a tripod if you're just filming one shot, but it definitely can be helpful with stability and composition of your videos. You can get all sorts of tripods, and there are some pretty cool flexible ones that you can buy and attach them to pretty much anything. Now that I've gone through some of the main items you'll need to start creating videos, let's quickly talk about pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is arguably the most important part of creating a video. Creating an outline for a video, studying that outline, and making sure you have done plenty of research definitely makes the filming and post-production processes so much easier. I personally have a lot of moments while I'm filming if I don't have an outline or something to go off of while filming. And these moments make post-production much more difficult for me. I usually create an outline in my Notes app on my iPhone, that way I can airdrop it to my Mac and make adjustments throughout the day when I think of them. Not all pre-production has to look the same, but this is what has worked for me personally. Do plenty of studying on the topic that you will be discussing, create an outline, gather the materials that you will need, and go over a checklist. This whole process makes everything that follows much easier. You'll also want to make sure the settings are where you want them on your camera. Using auto settings is an option and can make things easier, but it doesn't always guarantee the best quality. If you decide to use the manual settings on your camera, you'll want to check several things. One is the exposure. Getting the aperture right is one step. Aperture determines how much light comes into the camera and can make a big difference in how your footage turns out. Having an f-stop of f1.0, for example, will give you more of that blurry look in the background, with the subject sharply focused from the depth of field, where f22 might make everything sharp, including the background. So the lower the f-stop, it actually gives you more of a cooler effect with the blur in the background in this type of video, unless you specifically want things in the background to be in focus. The shutter speed on the camera should be double what the frame rate is, so if you're shooting at 24 frames per second, the shutter speed should be around 1/48 of a second. If the camera only gives you an option of 50, round up or down to whatever is closest to double the frame rate. If the exposure is still off after balancing shutter and aperture, using ND filters, adjusting your ISO, which is your camera's light sensitivity, or adjusting your lights may help. Just remember that adjusting the ISO might make the film look more grainy, so you may want to add or take away lights instead. Not sitting directly next to a wall will also give you more of that blurry effect. Like you can see here with this enclosure in the background. It's a little bit blurry, not quite as sharp and focused as I am. Now just remember that all of these things work together, so it may take a little bit of practice to get it figured out. You can also set your camera's white balance either by choosing one of the presets like outdoors, indoor, sunny, or shady, or by using a white card to get the color balanced most accurate. Now let's talk about the actual filming process. Find a good chair. I know it sounds silly, but it'll really help you relax. I have this sweet gaming chair that my girlfriend got for me, and you can find them pretty cheap at thrift stores or at garage sales. Also, as silly as it may sound, remember to breathe in between takes. I know that sounds silly. I have noticed in some of my clips that I've filmed in the past that I was actually louder in some clips compared to others, and I realized that I probably wasn't breathing very great and was rushing through. I think it's important to just find a way to relax and be yourself. Another thing to remember is to make sure that there aren't any noises in the background that might interrupt your filming process, like a noisy AC. Trust me, that's the worst. That's just another reason why making sure everything is prepared beforehand is so important. Also, if you're in the reptile hobby like I am, it's a good idea to keep one of your animals with you as a co-host, like Bucky here. Now, this just adds something cool to the shot other than just staring at my boring face, which leads me to my next topic, B-roll. B-roll is so important for keeping viewers entertained, and it gives them a good look at what you're actually talking about while you're talking about it, rather than just having to imagine it in their minds. B-roll gives you a chance to practice your camera work and always adds a little extra razzle-dazzle to your videos. Now let's talk about post-production. This is another super important part of being a content creator. Once you have your video clips uploaded, it's time to edit. Programs like Final Cut give you the option to organize in great detail, and I highly recommend this. You can create a library, an event within that library, and a project within that event. Programs like this one give you a lot of creative freedom, and you can really start to create your own style through the editing that you do. If you have any questions about how to use certain things within the programs, there are many different how-to videos on YouTube that go into great detail. One thing I will mention is that it's easy to get burnt out while editing. Make sure that if you're editing for many hours on end, that you take breaks in between and find time to relax. This is not only good for you, but it will help with the quality of your video in the long run. Editing for hours and hours straight can definitely cause a decline in your focus, and you may not realize it, but it could be causing a decline in the quality of your edit as well. Now find a good thumbnail. I will admit that I've been lazy with this in the past, to say the least. Learning Photoshop would be a plus, but similar to with video editing software, photo editing software can be cheap or free, and there are many options out. Creating a good thumbnail that pops out to the viewer very well could be the main reason why they click on your video. One last thing that I will throw into the post-production section of this video is the actual process of uploading your video to YouTube. Creating good keywords in your title can help viewers find your video, and it could help your video out a lot. It's a good idea to write a description about what your video is about, and you can add tags if you want, which may or may not help the viewers find your video. You can add your video to a playlist, add end screens, and promote your other videos, your channel, or other creators' channels or videos. Starting a YouTube channel can be intimidating, but if you make sure to keep the fun part of creating videos your top priority, I'll bet you'll start to make awesome content without even realizing it. Just make sure that you are doing something that you genuinely enjoy and have fun with. That makes the work part of it really not even feel like work. I just had to pause for a second because there were some really loud motorcycles going by, and I live right next to a highway. And that's also something that you want to keep in mind. Some things happen that are out of your control while you're filming, and it can be frustrating, but just try to have as much patience as you can, and it'll be worth it in the end. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope some of the things that I talked about today will be helpful for you and your YouTube journey in the future. If you aren't subscribed already, please subscribe. I would really appreciate it, and I'll see you in the next video. Man, Bucky, I do not know how to not be cheesy. Just cheesing left and right. Full of cheese. Lots of dairy. Alright.